Captain Adrian Vale stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, humanity's oldest surviving warship. It had long been dismissed as obsolete by the galactic powers, a relic of a forgotten era when Earth was still clawing for recognition among the stars. Once feared for its size and weaponry, the Eclipse was now little more than a museum piece, kept operational by a skeleton crew of dedicated engineers and military personnel. The Galactic Federation, and especially the arrogant Trellian Confederacy, referred to it mockingly as the Old Man of Earth. "Captain, all systems are green. The crew is ready for deployment," Lieutenant Kira Tanis reported, her hands moving expertly over the glowing control panel. Adrian nodded, his steel-gray eyes narrowing as he observed the stars stretching out before them. The Eclipse had not seen active battle in over 2 decades. It was no longer the pride of humanity's fleet, just a forgotten dreadnought in a universe that had moved on. The Trellian Confederacy had made sure of that. For years, they downplayed Earth's military as nothing more than a minor inconvenience. After all, what could a single, outdated warship possibly achieve against their cutting-edge fleet? "Keep us in stealth mode. I want our presence undetected until we reach the outer rim of the Trellian perimeter," Adrian ordered, his voice low and determined. Kira raised an eyebrow, curiosity flaring. "Do you think they'll even notice us, Captain?" Adrian smirked. "They will. Soon enough." The Eclipse drifted silently through space, its sensors attuned to the massive Trellian fleet stationed at the edges of the Cypress system. The Confederacy had recently conquered the outer colonies, subjugating them without mercy. Earth had protested, but their voices were drowned out by the more powerful races in the Galactic Council. To them, humanity was a nuisance, primitive, overly emotional, and lacking the technological prowess to make any real difference. But Adrian had a plan. He knew something they didn't. Hidden beneath the layers of outdated armor and retrofitted systems, the Eclipse held a secret weapon, a relic of humanity's desperate war against the coalition of Ascendants, an ancient, long-extinct enemy. Adrian's mission was simple: bring that weapon to bear against the Trellian forces and remind the galaxy why humans should never be underestimated. "Captain, we're approaching the Trellian fleet. Looks like they've set up a blockade near Cyper Prime. Scans show multiple capital-class ships, supported by a swarm of corvettes and destroyers," Kira reported, her voice tightening as the tension on the bridge rose. Adrian crossed his arms, his gaze fixed on the holographic display of the enemy fleet. It was a monstrous force, at least 30 ships, each one more advanced than the last. The Eclipse was a relic, but if everything went according to plan, the Trellians would soon learn just how wrong they had been about its capabilities. "Activate the cloak. I want us hidden until we're right on top of them," Adrian ordered, his tone cold and methodical. The Eclipse hummed as its stealth systems came online. Once, these systems had been the pinnacle of human ingenuity, capable of evading even the most advanced enemy sensors. Now, they were just barely enough to slip past the Trellians, but it would have to do. Minutes passed in silence as the Eclipse crept toward the heart of the enemy fleet. The Trellians were arrogant, complacent, their ships floating lazily in formation as if nothing could possibly threaten them in this sector. "Almost there, Captain," Kira whispered, her fingers trembling slightly on the controls. Adrian could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Everything hinged on this strike. If they failed, humanity would be left defenseless, mocked and disregarded by the galactic powers for generations to come. "Drop the cloak and power up the main weapon," Adrian commanded, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins. As the Eclipse emerged from stealth, alarms blared across the Trellian ships. They had spotted the dreadnought too late. Adrian watched with grim satisfaction as the enemy scrambled, their ships powering up shields and weapons, but it wouldn't matter. "Fire!" The Eclipse's secret weapon, a devastating pulse cannon designed to disrupt the molecular bonds of enemy shields, roared to life. A blinding beam of energy surged forward, cutting through space with deadly precision. The first Trellian capital ship it struck disintegrated in an instant, its shields evaporating as if they had never existed. The ship's hull shattered into 1,000 pieces, leaving the Trellian fleet in stunned silence. Adrian's heart pounded as he saw the destruction unfold. This was the beginning of humanity's resurgence, The moment they would remind the galaxy that Earth was not to be trifled with. "Target the next ship," he ordered, his voice dripping with cold resolve. The Trellian forces were in chaos, their once untouchable formation crumbling as the Eclipse moved methodically through their ranks, vaporizing ships with precision. Adrian could see the panic spreading among the enemy commanders, their arrogance shattered in the face of humanity's ancient war machine. "Let them mock us now," Adrian muttered under his breath, watching as the once mighty Trellian fleet burned in the cold darkness of space. The aftermath of the Eclipse's initial attack left the battlefield littered with debris and drifting carcasses of Trellian warships. Yet, despite the utter devastation caused by humanity's forgotten dreadnought, Adrian Vale knew the battle was far from over. The Trellian fleet wasn't just a collection of ships, it was a symbol of galactic power, pride, and ego. They would not retreat after the first blow. In fact, Adrian suspected they were preparing to retaliate with a fury that even the Eclipse's ancient firepower might struggle to withstand. "Captain, incoming signatures. I'm reading multiple capital-class vessels dropping out of FTL." Kira's voice rang out, her hands dancing over the tactical display as new red icons flashed on the screen. Adrian stared at the growing fleet on the holo display. Reinforcements. It had been expected, but the sheer size of the force now emerging from subspace was more than anticipated. He counted 5 new dreadnought-class vessels, each bristling with modern weaponry that dwarfed the capabilities of anything Earth had fielded for decades. "The Trellians never learn," Adrian muttered under his breath, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "They think overwhelming firepower will save them." Kira shot him a glance, her expression mixed with worry and awe at the destruction their ship had already caused. "Captain, we can't fight them all. The Eclipse's shields won't last long against that many ships, not with their tech. We're outnumbered 10 to 1. Adrian remained silent, his mind racing. Kira was right. The Eclipse had power, but it wasn't invincible. The Trellian fleet, still reeling from the surprise of their first losses, would regroup and come at them with everything they had. A direct engagement would be suicide. "No, Lieutenant, we can't win this by brute force," Adrian finally said, his voice calm despite the situation. "But brute force isn't what will win this war." Kira frowned, glancing back at the screen. "Then what's the plan?" Adrian's gaze flicked over the holographic display, analyzing the Trellian formation, their movements, their desperation. They were relying too much on their numbers and raw firepower. Typical of a species that had never faced an opponent who could turn the tide with a single, unexpected strike. "Lieutenant, prepare for evasive maneuvers. We're not here to destroy their entire fleet, just to send a message. And we've only started delivering it." Before Kira could respond, alarms rang out across the bridge. The Trellian reinforcements had fully entered the system, and the lead dreadnought, a massive black hulk brimming with plasma cannons and missile bays, was already targeting them. Adrian could see the enemy fleet was rapidly reforming, their ships converging to create a near-impenetrable wall around their flagship. Massive energy spike detected. "They're powering their main guns." Kira shouted, her eyes wide with alarm. "Shields at maximum output." The Eclipse shuddered as the first volley of plasma fire lanced toward them, the bright green bolts slamming into the ship's shields. The bridge lights flickered for a moment, but the old dreadnought's defenses held. "Shields at 80%. Kira reported, her hands gripping the console tightly. Adrian gritted his teeth. The Eclipse had powerful shields, but even they wouldn't hold forever against such concentrated firepower. He needed to buy them time to use the ship's hidden ace one more time. Initiate evasive maneuvers. Zigzag pattern, 20% power to thrusters. We're not outgunning them, just keep us mobile, Adrian barked. Kira immediately relayed the command, and the Eclipse's engines roared to life, the massive ship beginning to weave through the stars in a seemingly random pattern. Plasma bolts and railgun slugs filled the space around them, exploding harmlessly in their wake as the ship danced through the barrage. As the ship moved, Adrian turned his attention back to the holo display, studying the enemy formation. They were strong but too predictable. The Trellians relied on rigid textbook tactics, massive formations, overwhelming firepower, and slow, deliberate movements. They had forgotten that flexibility and adaptability were often far more lethal than size. "Captain, they're charging for a full assault," Kira warned, pointing at the holoscreen where several enemy ships were now clustering together, their weapons targeting the Eclipse with frightening precision. Adrian leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "But let them." For a brief moment, Kira looked puzzled, but she quickly masked her concern. The Eclipse's captain was not known for reckless decisions. If he was baiting the Trellians, he had a plan. Adrian pressed a button on his command console, activating a communication line to the engineering deck. "Rook, is the secondary system ready?" A deep, gravelly voice responded, "Captain, it's as ready as it'll ever be. You know this thing wasn't tested for real combat conditions." Adrian's lips curled into a thin smile. "Well, today we're running a live test. Prepare for immediate activation." Kira's eyes widened. "Captain, you don't mean—" "I do," Adrian interrupted, his voice filled with a dangerous calm. "We're about to remind the Trellians why humanity's archaic technology should never be underestimated." The Eclipse surged forward, moving closer to the heart of the enemy fleet. The Trellian ships, sensing their moment of triumph, began closing in, their cannons glowing with the power of their next deadly salvo. "Now!" Adrian shouted. The Eclipse suddenly halted, the entire ship humming with energy as a ripple of light spread across its hull. Then, without warning, the ancient dreadnought unleashed a wave of electromagnetic pulses. The pulses tore through the surrounding space, bypassing the Trellians' energy shields and frying their electronic systems. One by one, the enemy ships went dark. Engines sputtered out, weapon systems short-circuited, and shields collapsed. The mighty Trellian fleet, so confident in its superior technology, was now nothing more than a cluster of powerless hulks drifting through space. Adrian watched as chaos erupted across the battlefield. The Trellian ships were helpless, their crews scrambling to regain control of their vessels. The Eclipse loomed over them like a predator circling its prey. "Target their flagship," Adrian commanded, his voice cold and resolute. "Let's finish this." Kira nodded, her fingers flying over the controls as the ship's main weapon powered up once more. The dreadnought's pulse cannon, still charged from the previous engagement, locked onto the Trellian flagship. With a final, devastating blast, the beam tore through the enemy's remaining defenses, striking the ship's core. The flagship erupted in a blinding explosion, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. Silence fell over the bridge as the Eclipse drifted through the debris field, the once proud Trellian fleet reduced to ruins. "That should send the message," Adrian muttered, his gaze hard as he watched the last remnants of the enemy fleet burn in the distance. The destruction of the Trellian flagship had left a deep silence across the battlefield, one that seemed to stretch out into eternity. Captain Adrian Vale stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, watching the once mighty Trellian fleet crumble into drifting wreckage. They had underestimated humanity, their arrogance blinding them to the power that lay hidden beneath the old warship's aging hull. "Status report," Adrian commanded, his voice breaking the quiet. Kira quickly scanned the consoles. "Shields at 40%, but holding. All major systems are operational. The enemy fleet, well, there's not much of it left." Adrian exhaled, letting some of the tension drain from his body. The battle had been brutal, but they had achieved their goal. The Trellians would no longer see humanity as a forgotten relic. Their message had been sent, loud and clear. "Good work, Lieutenant. Begin recovery operations. Let's see if there are any survivors in the wreckage," Adrian ordered, though he knew there wouldn't be many. The Eclipse had done its job too well. Kira nodded and relayed the order, her eyes glancing at Adrian as if searching for something. "Captain, what happens now?" Adrian didn't answer right away. He stared out into the void, his thoughts drifting to the galaxy at large. The Trellian Confederacy wouldn't forget this. Today, they had been humiliated, but their defeat was only the beginning. The Eclipse had shown them that Earth was not to be trifled with, but it had also painted a target on their backs. Retaliation would come, he had no doubt about that. The Confederacy will regroup. They'll send more ships, bigger fleets. "We've hurt them, but we haven't broken them," Adrian finally said, his voice heavy with the weight of what was to come. Kira's expression darkened. Then, What was the point? Adrian turned to her, his eyes sharp. The point, Lieutenant, is that humanity isn't as weak as they think. We may be outnumbered, outgunned, and considered primitive, but we've shown them what we can do. The galaxy needed to be reminded that humans don't back down. Before Kira could respond, a warning klaxon blared across the bridge. Incoming transmission. One of the comm officers reported, his face pale. It's from the Trellian command ship. Adrian's heart skipped a beat. The battle had been won, but if the Trellians were sending a communication now, it wasn't for surrender. He nodded to the comm officer. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the stern visage of High Commander Zalor of the Trellian Confederacy. His reptilian features twisted with barely contained rage, and his eyes burned with hatred. Human, Zalor spat, his voice seething with contempt. You have made a grave mistake today. Adrian met the commander's gaze without flinching. The mistake was yours, Commander, when you thought you could dismiss us. Now you've paid the price. Zalor's face contorted further, his sharp teeth visible as he sneered. You think this victory means anything? You've destroyed a handful of ships, relics that we will replace with ease. Your eclipse is nothing more than a scrap heap, and soon, we will tear it apart along with your entire race. Adrian felt the anger rising in his chest, but he forced it down. He wouldn't let the Trellian commander rattle him. You'll try, Commander. But know this, for every ship you send, we'll send 10 back in pieces. Humanity will fight until the very last breath, and we'll take your confederacy down with us if we have to. Zalor's eyes narrowed, his tone dropping to something far more menacing. Then prepare yourselves, human. We are coming for you. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the bridge in a tense silence. Adrian stood there for a moment, processing the weight of the commander's threat. He had known this battle would be the spark that ignited a larger conflict, but now it felt real. The galaxy's attention was fixed on Earth, and the war that was coming would be unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Captain, Kira said quietly, her voice filled with worry. What do we do now? Adrian turned to her, a grim determination settling over him. We prepare. We won this battle, but the war has only just begun. As the eclipse drifted through the debris field, Adrian allowed himself one last look at the destruction they had wrought. The Trellians would regroup, and when they did, they would come in force. But humanity had something they lacked: resilience, adaptability, and a willingness to defy the odds. We'll be ready for them, Adrian said softly, more to himself than to anyone else. And when they come, we'll remind them why they should have never underestimated us. The bridge crew moved with renewed purpose, each one understanding the gravity of what lay ahead. The eclipse had proven itself once again, but the road to survival was far from over. Adrian looked out at the stars, his mind already racing with strategies, plans, and contingencies. The galaxy may have mocked Earth's useless warship, but now they knew the truth. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and their time in the shadows was over. Let them come, Adrian whispered, his eyes burning with the fire of a man who had seen too many battles and knew there were more to come. We're ready. End of story.